Ethan Ward had spent the last 3 years repairing machines that were older than some civilizations. The orbital capital of the Varelian Empire hung above a blue gas giant like a glittering crown forged from silver and starlight. Thousands of ships drifted around it every hour. Cargo vessels arrived from distant sectors. Diplomatic cruisers glided through controlled traffic lanes. Massive defense platforms rotated silently in the darkness beyond. And somehow, despite all that advanced technology, the atmospheric regulators in Dock 17 still broke every week. Ethan lay halfway inside an access shaft with a diagnostic scanner in his hand. "I swear this machine hates me personally," he muttered. The maintenance drone beside him projected a blinking warning symbol. "Official records indicate the machine lacks emotions." "Then explain why it only fails during my shifts." The drone considered this for a second. "I cannot." "Exactly." A few nearby workers laughed. The station was unusually busy today. Security officers were everywhere. Scanning gates had been installed overnight. Even the cleaning robots had received software updates. Whenever that happened, it meant only one thing. Royal inspection. Ethan groaned. He had never met the Queen, but everyone knew who she was. Queen Lyra Varelis, ruler of nearly 400 inhabited systems, commander of the largest fleet in known space. A woman whose decisions could shift economies and end wars. The fact that she occasionally toured infrastructure facilities personally was something Ethan found deeply suspicious. "No normal person voluntarily visits maintenance docks," he said. His friend Taryn, an alien engineer with long ears and an endless supply of sarcasm, leaned against a console nearby. "That's because you're assuming she's normal." "Fair point." Hours passed. The station became increasingly quiet. Workers straightened uniforms. Officers checked formations. Even the drone seemed nervous. Then the royal convoy arrived. Elegant black ships settled into the docking area. Energy shields shimmered. Rows of royal guards emerged. Ethan climbed out of the maintenance shaft and wiped grease from his hands. He intended to take one quick look and then return to work. Nothing more. Nothing less. Then Queen Lyra appeared. For a moment, the entire dock seemed to stop moving. She looked almost human. Almost. Her long, elegant ears marked her Varelian heritage. Silver white hair rested across dark ceremonial armor lined with glowing blue circuitry. Her posture was calm, confident, not intimidating through force, intimidating through complete certainty. She walked among officers and advisors while reviewing data projected in midair. Ethan stared longer than he intended. The Queen turned slightly as she spoke with a commander. Light from the station's ceiling reflected across her armor. Without thinking, Ethan whispered the first thought that entered his mind. What a beautiful queen. Unfortunately, he forgot one very important detail. His maintenance communicator was still active, connected to the inspection channel. The inspection channel connected to approximately 300 people. Silence exploded across Dock 17. Every conversation stopped. Every movement froze. Even the maintenance drone slowly rotated toward him. "Oh no," Ethan whispered. That sentence also went through the communicator. The silence somehow became worse. Taryn looked as if his soul had abandoned his body. Several officers stared at Ethan with expressions usually reserved for witnessing catastrophic reactor failures. A cargo robot accidentally drove into a wall. Then the impossible happened. Queen Lyra stopped walking. Slowly, she turned toward him. The entire dock held its breath. Ethan briefly considered throwing himself into the nearest airlock. The Queen's eyes settled on him. To his surprise, she didn't look angry. She looked curious, genuinely curious. A few seconds passed. Then she spoke. "Human." Her voice carried clearly across the dock. "What did you say?" Ethan felt every molecule in his body preparing to resign. "I..." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even the station AI seemed interested. The Queen tilted her head slightly. "Please repeat it." The request shocked the crowd more than the original mistake. Several officers exchanged alarmed glances. Taryn quietly smacked his own forehead. Ethan had absolutely no idea why. All he knew was that refusing a queen sounded dangerous, but repeating it sounded equally dangerous. His survival instincts offered no useful guidance. So against every warning bell screaming inside his mind, He swallowed hard and obeyed. I said, his voice cracked. He cleared his throat. Then he repeated the sentence. What a beautiful queen. The moment the words left his mouth, dozens of faces around the dock transformed into expressions of absolute disbelief. And for the first time since arriving, Queen Lyra smiled. Ethan did not sleep well. That was partly because his apartment overlooked one of the orbital station's traffic corridors, where cargo ships continuously passed by like glowing metal whales. Mostly, however, it was because he had accidentally complimented the most powerful woman in the galaxy. Twice. The second time had somehow been worse. He stared at the ceiling while his apartment's artificial intelligence adjusted the room temperature for the fifth time. Unable to sleep? The AI asked. You think? Your stress indicators suggest mild panic. Mild? Correction. Severe panic. Thank you. I exist to assist. Ethan rolled over and groaned. The Queen's smile kept replaying in his mind. Not because it was romantic, because it was confusing. Nobody had reacted normally. The guards looked shocked. The officers looked horrified. Taran had looked as if he had witnessed the end of the universe. And then the Queen had smiled. None of it made sense. The next morning made even less sense. The moment Ethan stepped outside his apartment, people started staring. Not aggressively, curiously. Two dock workers whispered something while looking at him. A service robot paused in front of him. Congratulations, Ethan blinked. For what? I do not know. The robot resumed cleaning. That somehow made the conversation worse. When he arrived at Dock 17, the situation became ridiculous. Workers stopped talking when he approached. Then they immediately started talking again after he passed. Taran was waiting beside a diagnostic console. The alien engineer took one look at him and burst out laughing. Oh, you're alive. Should I not be? Honestly, I wasn't sure. Ethan dropped his toolkit onto the floor. Everyone keeps looking at me like I accidentally started a war. Taran winced. Actually, starting a war would be simpler. What does that mean? Nothing. Taran. Nothing. Taran. The alien sighed dramatically. I legally value our friendship. Then explain. I legally value my survival more. That answer did not improve Ethan's mood. The morning continued with growing absurdity. Someone anonymously sent him flowers. Another person sent him a gift basket filled with expensive fruit imported from another star system. A third package contained a book titled 100 Ways to Survive Royal Courtship. Ethan immediately threw it into a recycling unit. 10 minutes later, he retrieved it, purely for investigative purposes. Around midday, he entered a maintenance corridor beneath the docking platforms. The quiet helped him think. Unfortunately, it lasted only 3 minutes. His communicator chimed. Maintenance Specialist Ethan Ward, he answered. This is Ethan. Remain where you are. The transmission ended. Ethan froze. That sounded official. Official was rarely good. A minute later, 6 royal guards entered the corridor. Not security officers. Not station police. Royal guards. The expensive kind. The kind equipped with armor containing enough technology to purchase entire cities. Ethan glanced behind himself. There was nowhere to run. Not that he planned to run. Running from royal guards seemed like an excellent way to create new problems. The lead guard approached. Specialist Ethan Ward? Unfortunately, the guard's expression twitched. Possibly amusement. Possibly a software malfunction. Ethan couldn't tell. The Queen requests your presence. His stomach dropped. Requests. That word sounded polite. Dangerously polite. What happens if I say no? The guards exchanged glances. One actually laughed. The commander cleared his throat. You may decline. Ethan brightened. Really? No one has ever tested that option. His optimism immediately died. A sleek transport vehicle was waiting outside. As they traveled through the capital, Ethan watched the city beyond the transparent walls. Towering structures stretched toward the artificial sky. Floating gardens drifted between skyscrapers. Streams of flying vehicles moved through invisible traffic lanes. Gigantic holographic displays floated above public plazas. The entire city looked like something built by people who considered ordinary physics a mild suggestion. Meanwhile, Ethan spent the journey preparing for disaster. Maybe the Queen was offended. Maybe there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe accidentally complimenting royalty carried a prison sentence, or exile, or mandatory poetry lessons. That last possibility sounded particularly terrifying. The transport finally arrived at the Imperial Palace. Ethan stepped outside and immediately regretted every life decision that had led him there. The palace was enormous. Its silver towers extended high above the city. Energy shields shimmered around elegant structures connected by glowing bridges. Thousands of years of history and advanced technology existed side by side. The guards escorted him through massive halls lined with living crystal walls. Every step increased his anxiety. Finally, they stopped before a large doorway. The commander faced him. "Wait here." The doors slowly opened. Warm light spilled into the corridor. Ethan swallowed. Beyond the doorway sat Queen Lyra, alone. No advisors, no generals, no politicians, just the queen. And to Ethan's complete surprise, she appeared pleased to see him. Ethan stood in the doorway for several seconds before realizing he was still standing in the doorway. The royal guards behind him remained perfectly motionless, waiting, judging, possibly enjoying this. He couldn't tell. Finally, he stepped forward. The enormous doors closed behind him with a soft, mechanical sound. The chamber was far less intimidating than he had expected. There were no golden thrones, no giant banners, no rows of silent nobles. Instead, large transparent walls revealed breathtaking views of the planet below. Blue clouds swirled across the gas giant beneath the orbital capital. Small spacecraft moved through the darkness like tiny sparks of light. The room felt less like a royal chamber and more like a private observatory. Queen Lyra sat near a circular table displaying floating holographic star maps. Up close, she looked younger than Ethan had imagined. Not young exactly, timeless. The kind of person who carried centuries of responsibility so naturally that it became part of who they were. Her long ears extended through silver-white hair that rested across her shoulders. Those same eyes that had unsettled half the station now focused entirely on him. "Please," she said, "sit." Ethan obeyed immediately, then accidentally chose the wrong chair. The chair analyzed his weight distribution and automatically rotated backward. He nearly fell. The queen watched him struggle with it. To Ethan's horror, she laughed. Not a polite royal laugh. A genuine one. The chair finally stabilized. "I planned that," Ethan said. "Of course. I wanted to test palace furniture. And it appears hostile." Her smile widened. The tension inside the room eased slightly. That surprised him. So did the fact that she seemed relaxed. There was no anger, no accusation, only curiosity. For a few moments she studied him. Finally she spoke. "You have caused considerable confusion across my capital." Ethan nodded. "I've noticed." "You truly did not know the meaning of those words?" "No." The queen leaned back. For the first time, genuine surprise appeared on her face. "You spoke them without understanding?" "I was admiring the queen." The moment those words left his mouth, Ethan regretted them. Lyra raised an eyebrow. "You are doing it again." "I am? You just complimented me a second time." "Third." "What?" "The station incident happened twice." Ethan groaned. The queen laughed again. This was not at all how he imagined meeting the ruler of an interstellar empire. Meanwhile, several holographic star systems rotated slowly above the table between them. Entire civilizations appeared as glowing points of light. Thousands of inhabited worlds, trade routes, military patrol sectors, ancient exploration corridors. The scale of it all was staggering. Lyra noticed him looking. "The Empire, it's enormous." Her expression softened. "Most people see power. And you don't?" "I see paperwork." That answer caught him completely off guard. She sighed dramatically. "Yesterday, I approved agricultural shipments from 12 planets." Ethan blinked. "Really?" "I spent 3 hours discussing grain production. The mighty queen of 400 systems. Do not underestimate grain. Entire governments have collapsed over grain." Ethan laughed. To his surprise, Lyra joined him. For several minutes, the conversation drifted naturally. Far more naturally than it should have. They spoke about the station, maintenance problems, artificial intelligences, starship design. At one point, Ethan described a repair accident involving a cargo elevator and a cleaning robot. The Queen nearly choked on her drink from laughing. You trapped yourself inside? For 6 hours. How? I pressed the emergency button. That should have helped. It did not. What happened? It was the button for emergency lockdown. For a moment, Lyra stared at him, then buried her face in one hand. Her shoulders shook with silent laughter. When she finally recovered, her eyes seemed brighter, warmer. Ethan found himself forgetting that he was speaking with a queen, and that realization frightened him slightly, because the woman sitting across from him seemed unexpectedly normal, intelligent, funny, lonely. The last thought surprised him most. As their conversation continued, Ethan noticed subtle things, the way she occasionally glanced toward incoming reports before dismissing them, the slight tiredness hidden behind her calm expression, the enormous responsibility surrounding her even in moments of privacy. At one point, dozens of notifications briefly appeared within a holographic display beside her. Military reports, economic projections, diplomatic updates, entire world seeking guidance. She closed them with a gesture. Later, Ethan stared. Can you just do that? I am the Queen. That sounds useful. It has advantages. And disadvantages? She looked toward the stars beyond the transparent wall. For the first time, silence settled between them. A great many. For several seconds, neither spoke. The vast galaxy glowed around them. Then a small notification appeared above the table. A meeting reminder. Lyra glanced at it and sighed. 7 ambassadors. That sounds unpleasant. It is. Ethan nodded sympathetically. The Queen smiled, and neither of them noticed that outside the chamber, rumors were already spreading through the palace faster than light itself. By the following morning, Ethan had become a problem. Not a criminal problem, not a security problem, a political problem. Unfortunately, nobody had informed him. He discovered it when he arrived at Dock 17 and found 3 strangers standing beside his workstation. All 3 wore expensive clothing. The kind of expensive clothing that silently announced, I have never repaired anything in my entire life. The tallest one smiled. It looked painful. Specialist Ethan Ward. Ethan immediately became suspicious. Nobody who smiled like that delivered good news. That's me. The stranger extended a hand. I am Lord Veyron. Ethan shook it. The noble looked surprised, almost disappointed, as if he had expected something dramatic to happen. We have been researching your background, Veyron said. Ethan blinked. You've been what? Researching. Why? The noble hesitated. Apparently he had not prepared for that question. Curiosity. That's concerning. The other 2 nobles exchanged glances. Veyron continued. We expected to find military achievements. I don't have any. Political influence? No. Secret wealth? Ethan laughed. That answer alone seemed sufficient. The noble consulted a holographic file. We discovered an incident involving a cargo elevator. Ethan closed his eyes. Not that story. Please, not that story. Unfortunately, it was that story. According to palace records, someone had already found it. The report appeared above the holographic display. Accidental self-confinement, 6 hours. Terran walked past at precisely the wrong moment. He immediately burst into laughter. The nobles looked confused. Ethan considered moving to another galaxy, a smaller one. After several awkward minutes, the nobles left, clearly disappointed. Apparently, the mysterious human connected to the Queen was simply an ordinary maintenance worker, which was entirely true. Mostly. Later that afternoon, Ethan received another unexpected message. A royal transport was waiting. Again. His co-workers gathered around him. One mechanic shook his head. I usually get parking fines. Another sighed. I once received a tax notice. Terran crossed his arms. And somehow, Ethan gets invited to the palace. It's not an invitation. It arrives in a royal transport. That doesn't prove anything. It literally has the Queen's symbol painted on the side. Ethan had no response. The transport carried him through the capital once more. This time he paid closer attention. The city was magnificent. Towering structures reached into the artificial sky. Floating parks drifted between skyscrapers. Quantum transit lines flashed across the horizon like rivers of light. Huge holographic advertisements displayed products from distant worlds. One promoted self-cleaning socks. Another promoted telepathic language courses. The galaxy was apparently full of strange priorities. The palace awaited him once again. When he entered the private observatory chamber, Queen Lyra was already there. She appeared busy. Several holographic displays surrounded her. Economic reports floated beside military projections. Colonization requests from frontier worlds waited for approval. The Queen glanced up and smiled. "You're late." Ethan looked alarmed. "I am." "No." She smiled slightly. "I wanted to see your reaction." He stared. The ruler of 400 star systems just made a joke. It was not a particularly good joke. It was terrifying. To his surprise, she laughed. The tension vanished almost immediately. As the afternoon progressed, Lyra showed him parts of the palace normally hidden from public view. Ancient halls blended seamlessly with futuristic technology. Living crystal walls stored historical records. Artificial intelligences maintained archives thousands of years old. One chamber contained a three-dimensional map of explored space. The projection filled an entire room. Billions of stars surrounded them. Ethan slowly turned in place. "That's incredible. It updates continuously. How many worlds are represented here?" "Nearly 12 million. He stared. His brain politely declined to process the number. At one point, he accidentally walked into a transparent energy barrier. The impact was not serious. Unfortunately, it happened directly in front of the Queen. Lyra tried very hard not to laugh. Failed. Completely. "I thought it was a doorway." "It is." "Then why did it stop me?" "Because you walked into the wall." Ethan pointed accusingly. "A very deceptive wall." The Queen was still smiling several minutes later. As they continued through the palace, neither noticed distant eyes watching. Not everyone was pleased by these meetings. Within another wing of the palace, several powerful nobles gathered around a projection table. Reports floated before them. Images of Ethan, records of palace visits, witness statements. One noble frowned. "A maintenance worker." Another nodded. "An ordinary human." Then why is the Queen spending time with him? Nobody had an answer, and that uncertainty worried them more than any answer possibly could. Meanwhile, far away from the growing political tension, Ethan and Lyra stood before a massive transparent wall overlooking the endless lights of the capital. For a few quiet moments, neither spoke. The city glowed beneath them. Ships crossed the night sky. Stars filled the darkness beyond. Neither realized that something simple had already begun to change. What had started as an embarrassing accident was slowly becoming something much more complicated. 3 days later, Ethan discovered that becoming famous was far worse than becoming trapped inside an elevator. At least elevators eventually opened. Fame did not. The moment he entered Dock 17 that morning, several workers stopped what they were doing. One waved. Another saluted dramatically. A third shouted, "How's the Queen?" Ethan immediately turned around and walked back toward the exit. Unfortunately, Taryn intercepted him. "Going somewhere?" "Yes." "Where?" "A distant moon. To escape responsibility. To escape people." Taryn laughed. The alien engineer seemed to be enjoying the situation far too much. Meanwhile, across the capital, a very different conversation was taking place. Within the Hall of Governance, dozens of nobles occupied a circular chamber beneath a floating holographic dome displaying the Empire's territory. Thousands of stars shimmered above them. Normally, discussions focused on trade agreements, border security, and economic development. Today, they discussed Ethan. Again. Lord Veyron stood at the center. "Our concerns remain valid." Another noble nodded. "The Queen continues spending time with him. He possesses no political status, no noble lineage, no military command, no diplomatic training." The discussion continued, yet the more they investigated Ethan, the stranger the situation became. Every report reached the same conclusion: ordinary, painfully ordinary. One investigator even submitted a 40-page analysis proving Ethan had accidentally purchased the wrong breakfast 6 days in a row. The evidence was overwhelming. The human was not secretly influential. He was simply human. Back at the palace, Queen Lyra stood before an enormous holographic archive. Ancient records floated around her. The archive itself was remarkable. Built thousands of years earlier, it contained cultural memories preserved through advanced quantum storage systems. Entire centuries could be reviewed through reconstructed historical simulations. A scholar adjusted several controls. "Your Majesty, we have recovered additional records." Lyra nodded. The recent political arguments had revived interest in the old tradition connected to Ethan's accidental compliment. Some nobles insisted it carried romantic significance. Others claimed it represented political recognition. Many simply disagreed with one another. The Queen wanted answers, real answers. The scholar activated a sequence. Ancient scenes appeared throughout the room. Historical figures materialized as shimmering projections. Varelian cities from centuries past emerged around them. Lyra watched carefully. What she saw surprised her. The tradition had originally emerged after a devastating era of deception. Political manipulation had nearly destroyed the early empire. False promises, hidden motives, manufactured loyalty. In response, society began valuing spontaneous honesty above almost everything else. The phrase Ethan had spoken belonged to that era. Not because it was romantic, because it was sincere, unexpected, uncalculated. The original tradition honored emotional truth. The scholar looked astonished. So many modern interpretations were wrong. Lyra silently agreed. Elsewhere in the palace, Ethan was having a significantly less historical experience. He had accidentally become trapped inside another piece of advanced technology, a transportation capsule, for the second time in his life. When the doors refused to open, he sighed. "This is becoming a pattern." The capsule AI responded immediately. "Your statement is statistically correct. Please open the door. You are standing on the emergency lock control." Ethan looked down. Of course he was. When the door finally opened, Queen Lyra happened to be waiting outside. For several seconds, she simply stared at him. "Ethan." "Yes? Did you imprison yourself again?" "Technically, the capsule did it." The Queen crossed her arms. "You were standing on the control. It was an aggressive floor." Her expression remained serious for approximately 2 seconds. Then she laughed. The sound echoed through the corridor. Ethan found himself smiling as well. Over the past few days, these moments had become increasingly common. Conversation came easily. Silences no longer felt uncomfortable. The distance between Queen and maintenance worker seemed strangely smaller whenever they spoke. As they walked through the palace gardens beneath an artificial sky, Lyra told him about the archive's discoveries. The tradition wasn't originally about choosing a partner. It wasn't. No, she looked thoughtful. It was about recognizing honesty. Ethan considered that. That actually makes more sense. It does. Good. Why good? Because if an accidental compliment automatically started a marriage process, your civilization would be terrifying. The Queen laughed again. Fair observation. For a while they walked among glowing alien plants and floating light orbs that drifted through the evening air. Neither noticed the observers watching from distant balconies. The nobles were growing frustrated. Their investigations were failing. The history they relied upon was proving incomplete, and the Queen herself seemed increasingly unconcerned by their objections. Far beyond the palace walls, the lights of the capital stretched across the horizon. Trade vessels entered orbit. Quantum gates connected distant systems. The empire continued moving forward. Yet beneath that stability, something subtle was changing. An old tradition was revealing forgotten truths, and two people who should never have met were beginning to understand each other far more than either expected. The message arrived shortly after sunrise. Not that sunrise truly existed inside an orbital capital. The station's artificial sky simply decided it was morning and illuminated millions of square kilometers accordingly. Ethan was halfway through breakfast when his communicator activated. A royal transmission. He nearly dropped his coffee. That reaction had become routine. "Specialist Ethan Ward." The voice belonged to one of the palace officers. "Her Majesty requests your presence." Ethan sighed. "I miss the days when nobody knew who I was." "You have said that 12 times. "You counted?" The palace AI counted. "That's somehow worse." An hour later, he found himself aboard a royal diplomatic vessel. The ship was beautiful. Unlike military cruisers covered in weapons, this vessel emphasized elegance. Silver corridors curved smoothly through the structure. Living walls generated oxygen. Advanced quantum engines hummed somewhere deep within the hull. The entire ship felt less like machinery and more like a moving piece of art. Ethan stood near a transparent observation chamber staring into space. Stars drifted silently beyond the glass. A nearby navigation display showed hundreds of worlds connected through trade routes and quantum gateways. The empire truly was enormous. "You look impressed." He turned. Queen Lyra had entered quietly. "I am." "You've never traveled aboard a diplomatic vessel?" "I repair atmospheric regulators." "Fair point." They stood together watching the stars. After a moment, Ethan glanced toward her. "Where exactly are we going?" "A border conference." That sounded innocent, which immediately made him suspicious. "Why do I feel there's more to that answer?" The Queen smiled. "There is." "Of course." A holographic display appeared between them. Several frontier systems glowed red. Unidentified signals had been detected near abandoned sectors beyond Imperial territory. Nothing openly hostile, nothing clearly peaceful. Enough uncertainty to concern officials. The conference would determine how neighboring civilizations responded. Ethan studied the display. The galaxy suddenly felt much larger and more dangerous. "You're bringing a maintenance worker to this?" "I am bringing someone who speaks honestly." The answer caught him off guard. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. Thankfully, the ship saved him, or rather, the ship embarrassed him. As they entered the diplomatic chamber, an automated protocol system scanned arriving guests. The system projected formal greetings in multiple languages. Unfortunately, Ethan stepped into the wrong scanning zone. A bright hologram appeared above his head. "Welcome, honored royal companion." The room went silent. Ethan stared upward. "Oh no." Several diplomats looked surprised. Others looked amused. The Queen closed her eyes briefly, not from anger, from obvious attempts not to laugh. A technician rushed forward. "Apologies, Your Majesty. The system appears confused." "It certainly does," Ethan muttered. The hologram remained active. "Welcome, honored royal companion." It even added decorative sparkles. The technicians eventually removed it. Mostly. One sparkle continued floating behind Ethan for nearly an hour. The conference itself proved far less entertaining. Representatives from multiple star nations gathered around a massive projection table. Alien species with different appearances and cultures discussed exploration rights, border security, and unidentified transmissions. Some possessed glowing skin. Others communicated partially through color patterns. One species seemed incapable of finishing a sentence without arguing with itself. The discussion stretched for hours. Yet Ethan noticed something. Throughout the negotiations, Lyra remained calm, patient, attentive. She listened more than she spoke, and when she finally offered an opinion, entire conversations shifted. Not because people feared her, because they respected her. Watching that was strangely impressive. Later that evening, after the formal sessions ended, Ethan and Lyra walked through one of the ship's observation gardens. Artificial trees glowed softly beneath simulated starlight. Gravity fields allowed floating flowers to drift gently through the air. The peaceful environment felt far removed from politics and uncertainty. For a while, neither spoke. Then Lyra finally broke the silence. "You have been unusually quiet." "I was thinking." "Dangerous," he laughed. "You spend all day negotiating with governments. And you make it look easy." The Queen looked toward the stars beyond the transparent ceiling. "It isn't." For the first time that evening, she seemed tired. Not physically, emotionally. The weight of responsibility appeared briefly beneath her calm expression. Ethan understood something then. Most people saw the crown, the fleets, the authority. Very few saw the person carrying them. "You know," he said quietly, "I think everyone forgets you're allowed to be human." She looked at him. Amusement appeared in her eyes. "I am not human." "You know what I mean." For several seconds, she simply watched him. Neither joked, neither looked away. Something unspoken lingered between them. Not awkward, not uncomfortable, just real. A nearby flower suddenly floated into Ethan's face. The moment shattered instantly. He sputtered while trying to remove glowing petals from his hair. Lyra laughed so hard she nearly lost her composure. And somewhere beyond the safety of the diplomatic vessel, far past explored space, mysterious signals continued pulsing through the darkness, growing slightly stronger with every passing day. The Grand Assembly convened beneath a dome large enough to contain its own weather systems. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the immense chamber. Diplomats, military commanders, scientists, governors, nobles. Even observers from neighboring civilizations occupied elevated galleries overlooking the central floor. Above them, a living holographic map of known space rotated slowly through the air. Millions of stars glimmered across the ceiling like a second galaxy. The atmosphere carried a strange mixture of anticipation and tension. For weeks, arguments had spread throughout the empire. The forgotten tradition, the Queen's meetings with a human, the political debates, the historical revelations. Today, everything would finally be addressed. Ethan stood near the edge of the assembly floor, trying very hard not to panic. "This is significantly worse than an elevator." Taryn stood beside him. "You compare everything to elevators. Because elevators are usually the most stressful thing in my life." "Not anymore." Ethan looked around the chamber. Unfortunately, Taryn was correct. At the center of the assembly stood Queen Lyra, calm as always, confident as always. The silver crown rested lightly above her long ears, while the galaxy itself seemed to shine behind her. The room gradually fell silent. Then she began to speak. Her voice carried effortlessly through the enormous hall. She spoke about history, about tradition, about forgotten meanings hidden beneath centuries of interpretation. Ancient records appeared around the chamber. Historical projections emerged from the archive discoveries. The truth became impossible to ignore. The ritual connected to Ethan's accidental compliment had never been created to grant privilege. It had never been intended as a political tool. Its purpose was simpler, and perhaps more important. It honored honesty, unplanned truth, the courage to speak sincerely without calculation, the very thing that had nearly disappeared during the Empire's darkest age. As evidence filled the chamber, many nobles visibly shifted in their seats. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked thoughtful. Lord Veyron looked as though he had swallowed a small asteroid. Ethan found that surprisingly encouraging. When the presentation ended, silence spread across the assembly. Not hostile silence. Reflective silence. The Queen waited patiently. Then she turned. Toward him, every eye in the chamber followed. Ethan immediately considered fainting. The option remained tempting. Lyra's expression softened slightly. Specialist Ethan Ward. The title still sounded strange. The room felt impossibly large. Yet somehow her voice reached him clearly. "Several weeks ago, you spoke words you did not fully understand." A few quiet laughs spread through the audience. Ethan joined them. "That was fair." The Queen continued. "Today you understand their meaning." He did, not because of tradition, not because of politics, not because of expectations. He understood the lesson hidden beneath everything that had happened. Honesty mattered. The Empire's founders had been right. The most meaningful truths were often the simplest. Lyra looked directly at him. The entire galaxy seemed to disappear, only for a moment. Then she smiled. The same smile that had changed everything inside Dock 17. "Would you repeat them?" A few months ago, he would have panicked. Now he simply took a breath. He stepped forward. Not as a frightened maintenance worker, not as a political symbol, just himself, the person he had always been. "I would." His voice remained steady. The massive assembly watched quietly. Ethan met the Queen's eyes and spoke. What a beautiful Queen. No gas followed, no chaos, no confusion, only understanding, because everyone finally knew what the words truly represented. Sincerity, nothing more, nothing less. Lyra's smile widened. For several seconds, neither spoke. The assembly gradually erupted into applause. Not for romance, not for politics, for the truth that had survived centuries. Across the chamber, even many former critics joined the applause. The debate was over. The matter settled. The Empire would move forward. Later that evening, after the crowds dispersed and the formal ceremonies ended, Ethan found himself standing once again beside a transparent wall overlooking the Capitol. Ships crossed the night sky. Quantum gates flashed in the distance. The endless city glowed beneath them. Lyra stood beside him, peacefully, comfortably. No audience remained, no politics, no expectations, just two people watching the stars. The mysterious signals beyond Imperial space had already been identified as automated beacons, left by an extinct exploration civilization. The border concerns were resolved. The political disputes had faded. The future felt unexpectedly open. Ethan leaned against the glass. You know, this entire situation could have been avoided. The Queen glanced at him. Oh? There should be warning signs. Warning signs? He nodded seriously. Complimenting royalty may result in diplomatic incidents, historical research, and widespread public attention. Lyra laughed. The sound echoed softly through the observatory. I will have signs installed. Thank you. Perhaps near the elevators. Ethan groaned. The Queen laughed harder. Beyond them, stars stretched endlessly into the darkness. And for the first time since a careless thought escaped through an active communicator, Ethan felt completely at peace. The galaxy remained vast. The future remained uncertain. But sometimes a single honest sentence could change everything. And sometimes, against all odds, that change could be something wonderful.